Hello, I'm Kad, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be talking about my fusion plan for getting Lysanthir Beastbane, the latest hybrid style fusion and potential Hydra specialist DPS champion. So let's go ahead and take a look at him. Lysanthir is a defensive-based Spirit Affinity legendary from the High Elves, and as you can see from his base stats, he is definitely a damage dealer. 18k on the HP, which is a healthy chunk. He's fairly survivable, fairly tanky. 1500 on the defense, of course his damage is based on defense, decent speed 103, and then 63 on the crit damage. Let's walk through his kit, starting off with the A1. Attacks one enemy 2 times, has a 100% chance when booked of placing Hex on the target for 2 turns, and it will also place increased damage on himself. So this is nice. It is a Hex ability, but considering that he is a Hydra specialist, this is a bit unfortunate because of course you cannot target the head of Mischief with just the A1 without Hex being out there, so it's a little bit of anti-synergy there because you can't put it on the target who wants it the most. But of course you can pair him with some other hexing champion and or some champion who has the cursed set, and then you can get a lot more value on this relative to the head of Mischief. On the A2, attacks one enemy 2 times, has a 20% chance of repeating the attack. This is kind of like a Georgid, a Fushan, those types of champions. So when they repeat the attack, it can actually do a substantial amount of damage, potentially. And then more importantly, he uses this ability instead of the A1 whenever he's counterattacking or joining in on ally attacks. So this is a much harder hitting ability compared to the A1, and it can even increase its damage based on the amount of times an ally is devoured, which of course is a Hydra specific mechanic. So essentially, once 5 people on your team get devoured, this will be maxed out at the 50% cap, and so this ability will just do 50% more damage every subsequent time it's used, including when he uses it himself on a 3-turn cooldown or when he's counterattacking or joining in on an ally attack. So again, this can deal out a significant amount of damage. And then lastly, on the A3, we have an AoE attack here, a double hitter. First hit or each hit can place decreased speed and weaken. So we have another AoE weaken champ, another AoE decreased defense champ specifically built for Hydra Clan Boss. And then if the target happens to be under Hex, again, he only has it in his kit on the A1, so you do want to have Hex in your team if you're going to use him for Hydra. Then he will place these debuffs before attacking, so he could be affinity friendly depending on the team that you put around him. And this is a 100% chance when booked, and it books down to a 3-turn cooldown. Moving on to the passive here, he can ignore Life Barrier, which is again a Hydra specific thing, which is the ability that the Head of Decay can place when he cleanses a single target. And then ally protection buffs as well, so he ignores ally protection, which again is not a Hydra specific mechanic, but it is a mechanic that the Head of Suffering, I believe, uses to protect the other heads from damage. And then he also increases his defense by 5% up to 50% for every active buff on the champion. And of course you can only have a maximum of 10 buffs, and so that makes sense. There caps out at 50% because you can't get any more buffs than that, but they do have to be active, and it is not permanent, unlike other champions who kind of scale with the duration of a fight. This is for however many buffs are active on him at that particular moment when he is attacking. And then we round it out with a defense aura in all battles by 28%. So overall, I think I give him like a solid B minus. He's definitely one-dimensional, and that's very much apparent that he is built and advertised as a Hydra DPS. He can kind of compete with the likes of Thor for the slot of decreased speed, but he's also bringing in the weaken, which is a little bit above what Thor can do. But by contrast, Thor does bring his own increased attack for himself, so that is a form of Thor increasing his own damage. This guy will need someone to provide increased defense for him. But yeah, this ability definitely can smack on decapitated heads as well as live ones, so it can do a lot of damage, especially once you max out the increase. And then once you start to repeat the attack, the damage potential can definitely skyrocket from there as well. Now, with all that said, I'll be the first one to admit that this champion is extremely situational. It really does depend on who you have on your account. If you're still progressing through Hydra, you only have one team going at the moment, or you want to build out other teams, you want to improve your other teams, then he could come into certain team compositions, ideally ones with some ally attack and or counterattack in them. But the point is, from the test server footage that I've seen, he can be serviceable. He's somewhat on par, maybe a little bit worse than a Thor, with like fully kitted out there with blessings and all that extra stuff. And I assume that after the fusion, we're going to have a chance to get up to a 5-star soul, just like they have done for every single fusion thus far. But yeah, if you already have teams, you don't really need to improve it, then this guy is useless. That's kind of where he falls into the camp for me. I don't need an extra DPS on any of my teams, so I don't plan to use him, despite going for him, as we'll talk about that a bit later. But if you are working on your teams, you only have one good team for Hydra, you only have two good teams, you need a third, then this guy could definitely come in. So I wouldn't skip him just because endgame people like myself say they don't have a purpose for him. So if you do plan on going for him, let's talk about how you can get him in the fusion plan spreadsheet, which will be linked in the description box down below if you'd like to look at this for yourself. So we have a pretty standard layout for the fusion overall in terms of the events and the tournaments. We have the 4 dungeon split, we have 2 classic arena tournaments, we have a champion training tournament, we have 2 dungeon divers, we have 3 gear enhancements, we have a champion training event, we have a summon rush, and that is it for the normalcy. However, there is one glaring oddity going on here. There is no champion chase at all. So that tournament does not exist in this case, but in its stead, there is a hero's path going on here. So I believe from what I've seen from the calendar itself, it says summoning champions and getting artifacts, i.e. dungeon divers. So there is effectively Dungeon Divers 3 going on during this period, these 4 days, as well as the primary source of points, of course, being summoning champions. And to my eyes, I read that as another summon rush and not as a champion chase. So my interpretation of this fusion is that we effectively have 2 different summon rushes. However, there still might be a 2x, whatever, my guess is Sacreds, but there still might be a 2x going on during this upcoming week, or this weekend in particular, but we'll have to see once we get closer to that to see if that is the case. So that's definitely one of the main things to note here, the absence of the champion chase and the replacement of that champion chase with the hero's path. But the other thing to highlight, of course, is that this is a hybrid style fusion. So you can see here that you do have to collect a bunch of fragments for the epic and then fuse those together, or summon each of the epics, level them up and ascend them, and then fuse that in to the legendary himself. And I do think it's important to weigh that into your decision to go for the fusion, because hybrid style is one of the most difficult forms, because you do have to focus a lot more on the events to make sure that you have enough fragments to fuse all the epics, or else you're SOL and you're not going to be able to complete it. And because it's a void epic, it's a lot harder to pull it after the fact, and so you might not be able to get the fusion done if you're missing any of those epics. But aside from that, we do also have the standard pinch points, which are the overlaps between champion training and some of the dungeon tournaments. And we're starting off with a pinch point here with the overlap of champion training and spider, with a little bit of Fire Knight as well. And then somewhere in the middle of the fusion, champion training will overlap with the entirety of the dragon tournament. For anyone unfamiliar with the format of the spreadsheet, over here on the right hand side, we have a list of all the milestones for all of the events and tournaments, at least the ones that are active for this given fusion. And we do have, them going all the way back to Pythion for historical precedence if you do want to go back and look at some of these. Anything that is marked with an asterisk means that it is a predicted value based off historical precedent. And so I will go in there and update it once the events go live. As you can see here, like the champion training event, for example, is live, and we can confirm that it is at 6,100 points. I also do like to go in here and mark how much silver I spend on each of the gear enhancements to give you guys an idea how much they might cost. 25 million is my standard estimate, and it's up to, but it's not necessarily going to exceed that. And there have been plenty that have been much cheaper than that. So it's just kind of a ballpark number. And of course, you're going to be earning silver throughout the dungeons and champion training throughout the course of the fusion. So it's not that you need to have a stockpile of 75 million silver ready to go. And then I also highlight the amount of shards that I plan to spend or will have spent on the different events, depending on what they are, what the milestones are, and what's required, and how badly do I want the extra rewards from whatever event or tournament they're associated with. We saw it a bit earlier, but at the bottom of every fusion, I do highlight my energy plan, which is just an outline of how I plan to spend my energy over the course of the fusion. That does not mean that you need to follow this exact pattern, but this is nonetheless a guideline for how I plan to do it. And then also, lastly, if we hop over to a different tab, we do have multiple tabs in the spreadsheet. And if you want to know the potion requirements for fusing all of the epics together, we just have a hybrid style fusion here. So the 4 epics that are void, meaning that these are the potions that you're going to need. Obviously, I'm assuming that you probably have the graders, but the superior, you need 24 of the voids and then 12 of the arcanes. And that's all you're going to need to ascend all of the epics for the purpose of fusing the legendary. Hopping back in game, we could talk a little bit of strategy here with some of the current events going on in the game. But first, as I always do, I like to highlight in the beginning of every fusion my supply count, and we can track that over the course of the fusion. I will summarize the deltas in a post on my community tab at the end of the fusion, just to highlight what it actually cost me in terms of silver and gems and shards to get the fusion complete. So we're benchmarking this particular fusion at, let's call it 172 million on on the silver, and then 3,900 on the gems. In terms of being strategic for this particular fusion, CVC starts tomorrow, so I'm definitely holding off on using a bunch of the energy stuff that I've gotten for today's reset. I'm going to wait until CVC is live. Same thing for the Dungeon Divers event. We're going to be waiting for that to go live before I use a bunch of energy on champion training as well as the spider tournament. So I've done a little bit just because I had to use energy from the reset before this evening and stuff like that, but we're going to hold off on going ham on champion training and spider until CVC is live, as well as the Dungeon Divers event is live. So kind of holding off on that and holding off on basically everything else that is associated with points during CVC, as you can see here. So there you have it. That's going to do it for my fusion plan for Lysanthir Beastbane. Let me know in the comment section down below if you are going to be pursuing this fusion. I do expect that more people probably than not are going to be skipping him just because he can be fairly underwhelming, particularly if you're like me and your Hydra teams are already set and you don't really need a flex DPS spot in the future. But I will be going for him just because I always have the resources to do every single fusion, despite being free to play and in the end game. And that pursuit is independent of the quality of the champion. I've done even the worst bottom of the barrel fusions in the past few years regardless. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this champion. And as always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit the like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And if you're enjoying the content overall on the channel, then feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well. Thanks for watching and have a good one.